The results of the Oscars are here, so it's time for a rant about how everything's wrong. Yes, everything's wrong, but the importance of the Oscars is in decline, and the ratings show exactly that. Receiving an Oscar nomination is still important, but not as important as before. There's a huge number of people, more than ever, who are firmly convinced that the awards are less and less about the films these days. Actually, it is a trend of the last few decades. They are mostly just exercises in virtue signaling or whatever these old filthy rich people have in mind right now. So people sometimes are like, oh, another piece of trash won an Oscar. Okay, nothing new, business as usual. So, first things first, the ratings. They went up compared to 2022, probably because people are secretly hoping for the punch up. I think Will Smith actually did a lot last year to increase the ratings of the next show. You really want to turn on the TV hoping that things will escalate to, I don't know, a wrestling match or throwing feces at each other. Because that's the direction the most prestigious movie awards show is taking. They tried to play safe this year, though. What a disappointment. Obviously, the ratings are still significantly lower than 10 years ago. They were essentially going down since 2014, and then there was an enormous drop after 2020. So the Oscars in 2021 hit rock bottom, which can be attributed to pandemic, but also, well, as we already mentioned, the Oscars are becoming less and less relevant for the majority of the public. Now, the nominations and the winners. You could check the betting odds before the show to understand that the Best Picture award for Everything Everywhere was pretty much a done deal. The film actually won 7 Oscars, which is, well, it could have been worse. But it is quite self evident that all of this pushing everything everywhere for the win has more to do with political reasons than with the quality of the movie. If you've watched my reviews of the movies nominated for the Best Picture, you probably know that I think that out of all the available options, out of all of the nominees, and some of them are very questionable, well, the Best Picture is probably Tar, and the Best Director is obviously Todd Field. I know this is not a very popular opinion, especially since Everything Everywhere All at Once is generally well received by the public. You know, people are sticking objects up their asses in the movie. All of the main characters are Chinese, while the movie itself is American. That's very progressive. Plus, you have this pop philosophy of being kind. What not to like about this film, really? Basically, the only problem with Everything Everywhere is that it's not a good movie. It is mediocre at best. So, out of available options, both Tar and All Quiet on the Western Front could have been a much better choice. The actors. Everyone is obviously happy for Brendan Fraser, myself included, for his performance in The Whale. But then again, we have this weird problem of winning an Oscar because you're doing something outrageous to your body. You know, this trick that Charlize Theron did for Monster, or Jared Leto and Matthew McConaughey losing weight. Now we have Brendan Fraser and his elaborate makeup and visual effects that turn a reasonably good looking middle aged man into your mom. I'd say that Bill Nye gives a better performance in Living, but he didn't have to wear a sandbag strapped around him and spend hours on makeup. So that's a no go for the Academy, which is a little bit sad. Since the Academy decided that 2023 is the year of Asian Americans, the best actress obviously went to uh, a Malaysian Chinese actress. Well, it is a good performance, and it is hard not to feel happy about Michelle Yeoh. But giving her award over Kate Blanchett is just a travesty, especially considering the insane amount of preparation she needed for her role in Tar. You know, learning how to persuasively portray a conductor, which included rehearsals with the actual orchestra and learning some German, etc. Both awards for Best Supporting Actor and Actress went to Everything Everywhere as well. Both categories are slightly weird this year. I mean, the list of nominees even includes Judd Hirsch, who literally was in the Fablemans for 5 minutes. It's like nominating somebody for a cameo appearance. Obviously, it is hard not to sympathize with both winners, especially Kwan, but, strange categories. Best Original Screenplay obviously went to Everything Everywhere because the Academy doesn't really know and doesn't really care what a quality screenplay is. They even nominated Glass Onion for the Best Adapted Screenplay. I'm shocked that Wakanda Forever doesn't have this kind of nomination. Or, I don't know, the Multiverse of Madness. Actually, the award for the Best Adapted Screenplay is probably one of the worst. I mean, they gave the award to Sarah Polley for Women Talking. It is a competent script, especially considering the main challenge. Most of the film is set essentially in one room, or in a barn, to be precise. But it has this atrocious message of radical feminism and talks about re-education of men. Sarah Polley started her acceptance speech with a distasteful joke. I quote, "I just want to thank the Academy for not being mortally offended by the words women and talking so close together like that." Great. Obviously, she showed up dressed as a man. Nothing screams radical feminism more than, well, dressing up as a man. Because women are, basically men, but better in every way. An upgrade, as Doctor Who told us a little while ago. So the Academy obviously ticks the necessary representation and empowerment boxes here. Even though the script for Women Talking, which is not a good movie, was competing against All Quiet on the Western Front and Living. The latter was actually written by Kazuo Ishiguro, who won a Nobel Prize in Literature. And his script is naturally a much better work. All Quiet on the Western Front managed to win 4 Oscars, all of them well deserved. Avatar won the Best Visual Effects, which is the most logical choice indeed. Black Panther Wakanda Forever won one award because the Academy just couldn't leave this film with no Oscars at all. So they gave the award for the Best Costume Design, which led to quite an ugly speech by the recipient, Ruth Carter. Something like, "Thank you for recognizing the superhero that is a black woman. And we are reshaping how culture is represented." The costume design in both Black Panther movies is a separate subject, I guess. But it kind of puzzles me why it gets so little criticism. Media usually emphasizes how it all is inspired by Afrofuturism, how it reflects African history somehow, while in fact they just borrowed the costumes, hairstyles, and stuff like that from the most exotic looking African tribes. Some of them, like Himba, the ones with hair covered with clay, are incredibly small, like 50,000 people. And Mercy people, the ones with the lip plate, are like 10,000. This is a very problematic approach that turns everything into a circus. One can even construct a case of quote unquote cultural appropriation. Because, there are thousands of different cultures in Africa, which is a pretty big continent. And African Americans, or Americans in general, are not really related to them. Culturally, they are more related to, I don't know, to Hungarians than to Mercy people. So there are some questions about this reshaping how culture is represented. Obviously, giving anything to Wakanda Forever, which is a seriously bad movie, was a purely political decision. Because, representation, empowerment, inclusivity, all that stuff. On the political front, the Academy, also as expected, gave the best documentary to Navalny, a film about the eponymous Russian politician, which supposedly sends some kind of message. Even though Navalny is a very controversial figure in Russia, he is not supported by the vast majority of people who are not happy with the regime in the Kremlin. The documentary actually focuses not on his anti corruption activities, but on his poisoning, which quite probably was staged. And the film features some notorious propaganda workers masquerading as investigative journalists. On the other hand, the Academy decided not to allow the actor who plays the president of Ukraine to deliver the speech where he asks for more money and weapons. Again, although it would have looked interesting if they put him on the big screen right after the trailer of All Quiet on the Western Front, an anti war film which implies that unconditional surrender is a good way to save lives. The best thing that happened at the Oscars, in my opinion, is that they actually gave the best original song to Natu Natu from RRR. 10 years ago, I'd never believed that the first Indian song to win an Oscar would be a song in Telugu. No, seriously, not in Hindi, but in Telugu. Although there are other versions in existence, obviously. I think that the Academy should return the nomination for the Best Dance Direction. They actually had it back in the 1930s, so that Indian films could win it every single year. Also, let's be honest, RRR is a better movie than Everything Everywhere All at Once.